Hello, everybody. Back again with another fresh installment here between none other than world number one, Magnus Carlsen versus world number two, Fabiano Caruana. We know that these two are arch rivals. They have had countless exciting battles over the years, and today they face each other in freestyle chess, 960 chess, a different variation of chess. As we can see already here, how the starting pieces are arranged much different than your classical chess. So it's very exciting. Theory is out of the window. They're taking each other on in Singapore just before the World Championship match between Ding and Gukesh, and this proved to be an enthralling encounter. In this game, Magnus had the white pieces, and let's see how it went. F4, immediately asking the question, what will you do about that pawn on a7, Fabi? Because the queen is already eyeing it on move one. This is what makes it so exciting, yeah? Fabi responds with knight b6, defending that pawn and developing his pieces. Knight c3, f5, so it's sort of symmetrical now, just with the knight on one knight on c3, the other one on b6. But the pawns mirror each other. Okay, we have knight to b3, Magnus removing his knight there from the corner. Fabi goes knight a6 with intentions maybe later to go knight c5 and stopping Magnus's knight from jumping into c5 because knight a6 also stops ideas of knight to b5 and knight c7 ideas of check. If the pawn hadn't moved, it could even have been mate, right? On c7. All right, this was some of the analysis that the commentators were discussing. Okay, we have d3 by Magnus, trying to open up lines for the bishop later and apply more pressure here on b6, a7. We have c6, Fabi wants to counter by striking in the center perhaps, could be his intentions. Then we have bishop to e3, Magnus then follows up on this, and now it's hard for Fabi to actually hold on to this pawn, and we'll see how Fabi responds by going g5, striking on the other side of the board, which is actually one of the top recommendations then by the engine, because Fabi knows, okay, I'm losing this pawn, let me strike on the other side of the board and try to create some chaos. All right. Okay, we have f takes g5. Fabi goes e5 and takes a BBC, which is known as the big black center, right? Then we have g4. Magnus tries to counter strike. Then Fabi says, nope, I'm pushing that pawn. It's rolling down the board. We have f4, and that bishop has to move. So the bishop captures then b6, a takes b6, and queen takes b6. So if we look at this position now, Magnus is currently 2 pawns up, but not for long, as the g5 pawn will be hanging or is hanging, and Fabi captures. So we see now that the queen is on b6. Magnus has got some development going. Just the bishop that's coming out. Intentions, the bishop will maybe come on this long diagonal, which it does soon. And Fabi would then want to just castle the king. So some of the rules in freestyle chess then, to castle kingside in this position, it would be enabled because there's nothing blockading the king from going there. Although no, in this example, Fabi cannot go queenside, for example, because for example. Yeah, Magnus can opt for queen side as well. There's nothing distracting or in the way, as well as king side. Was knight a5, putting more pressure on this knight, on this pawn on b7. So Fabi respond by castling, getting the king into safety, and perhaps telling Magnus, okay, you can do what you want to on the king side. I'll just develop my king, get it into safety, and bring out my rooks. Magnus says, okay, fine, I'm going to go bishop e4. The idea here is to go bishop f5, because if Fabi can get this in and Magnus doesn't go bishop f5, then that bishop is basically a lost piece, right? Fabi says, okay, I'm going to give you a check first, like a sort of intermezzo. Magnus goes king d2, and Fabi drops back to e7, somewhat defending this pawn with this d5 thrust coming, right? All right, so here Magnus goes bishop f5. You might ask, why not go bishop or knight takes on b7? The reason being, you'd have knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and although Magnus is 2 pawns up, there's this knight c5. Very annoying, attacking the queen and the bishop. Magnus would have to go queen to c7, and now if Fabi would just then drop the knight back, to e6, and it's very comfortable, right? After this, then threatening the queen again. This knight is dancing, and the queen is sweating. So queen to a7, rook a8, queen f2. Fabi's got nice space. You could argue this is very good compensation for the rooks coming down. Magnus's king is awkwardly placed. He cannot castle anymore. It's going to have to artificially castle, but it would be really strange for the king to run down to the queen side like this when the rooks are already on these open files, eh? Kind of dangerous. But in the game, this does not happen as it continues. Instead of, let's go, instead of the knight taking on b7, we had bishop to f5, right? Putting more pressure on here. And if d5, then Magnus says, okay, I'm just going to take a bishop, right? And this pawn is extra weak. So how does Fabi respond then? After bishop f5, we have knight to c5, trying to protect there as well. Okay, knight to e4 then, and Fabi says, nope, I'm dropping back to e6. And in this position, you'll see it's slightly better for white, but still nothing to write home about. It's quite level, quite solid. Fabi's defending well, playing very well despite being down a pawn. This g5 move was very important early on, and it creates some dynamics in the position. So Magnus says, okay, I'm going to give you my bishop for the knight, and Fabi recaptures with the queen. So Magnus says, fine, I'll take that pawn now with my knight. Fabi recaptures with the bishop, getting rid of this bad bishop because it wasn't active. And we'll see this might be a problem for Fabi in the rest of the game because this dark square bishop really needs to come out. Magnus has got all his pieces out, right? The knight has been active, it's been moving. This rook is not difficult to really get into the game. The other one as well, right? So Magnus goes queen takes on b7. We have rook to b8 then, threatening the queen, and here queen to c7. And in this position, Fabi makes the losing move by playing rook takes b2. It would have been better then to play d5 to get this thrust in. D5 ideas, then d5, the knight has to jump. Let's say the knight goes to f2, and perhaps then, right? Oh, not to e2. E2 is a bit. Perhaps knight to g5, right? Or c5. Knight to c5 attacks the queen, queen to e8. Oh yes, yes, of course. And then queen to d6, uh, rook to f6, queen to d7, and the game goes on. You can see how the queen is dancing, right? It's important here not to trade because this happens and then your rooks are flying. One of them will be lost. But if we go back then, after queen c7, Fabi takes on b2, and we'll see now that Magnus gains easy access with the rooks coming to b1 and opening this file. Because now if rook b1, Fabi doubles up with the rooks, Magnus just recaptures. If Fabi goes maybe rook to b8, rook takes b2, rook takes b2, Magnus has open access and upper clean pawn, right? And this knight is very powerful, a centralized knight. This bishop's not doing anything, so Fabio will basically be playing down a piece in that position. Let's just show the sample. Um, or even queen takes a2, or rook to b1. I was saying rook b8. Okay, yeah, this is much better than for Magnus because takes. And with this check coming, the queen has to move, the king has to move, and then simple. The pawn's thrust. You could even start maybe with knight c5, but h4, h5. And the main problem in this position is now the bishop. It's locked behind the king, right? So after that, we had rook takes b2. After that, rook b1. And now we have queen takes on a2. And now the problem again is the danger. The king is not really protected, right? And this d7 pawn is free now as the queen has just moved away. Rook takes b2, queen takes b2, queen takes d7, and now it is really difficult for Fabiano to carry on here. After queen takes c7, d7, we have bishop, queen to b4, check. Magnus just plays c3, and if another check is thrown on b2, Magnus slides back to e1, bishop to g7, too little, too late. There's too many attacks coming now. The queen is active, lots of ideas in this position. Queen to f6, checking to h8, rook to f3, doing a rook lift. The intention is to maybe to go rook h3 here, knight g5, as simple. Okay, queen to c1, Fabi thinks, okay, there's some checks in this position. King to f2 and queen to h1. It's important now to go rook h3 here to stop Fabi from capturing on h2 and giving more checks. F3 by Fabi. Magnus trying to go for counterplay, but Fabi Fabi trying to go for counterplay, but Magnus just captures, and there's enough protection here on the f3. If the rook was on another square, let's say h4, then it's a lot of trouble here. Queen takes on f3 checking h1, and then simple queen f1 would be mate in that position. But now we have rook to b8. Fabi's trying to generate some counterplay by going this rook to b2. And if Magnus maybe played a slow move, let's say in this position, if he played, let's say d4, suddenly the tables turn because it's a mating terrain. Rook b2, you can't even go there because now simple queen e1, checkmate. Right, so we go back. Rook to b8 then, and Magnus finds the winning move here. It's not the only one, but the most classy and cleanest one, g5. And the reason why g5 is so good is because after the rook gives a check, the king would go to g3, and if check on g1 with the queen, the king hides away on a light square eventually on h5, and Magnus would have no material to give a check because the queen can't check on d1, for instance, because the pawn on f3 stops that, right? And this is a dark square bishop. If it was a light square bishop, yes, there could be checks, but the dark square bishop has no entry point, right? It's too many pawns you're blocking the rook to check on the fourth or fifth rank. No ideas there. So after g5, b2 check, king to g3, queen to g1, and it looks ominous, right? Fabi's pieces, major pieces are all over Magnus' king, but then the simple queen, king to h4, rook to b8 to stop this, but after knight to d6, this is incoming with discovered checks, and this is where Fabiano resigns. The reason why we resign, let's show quickly. If the top moves are played, rook to f8, yeah, it's simple, knight to f7, rook, and this is fourth because of now the simple king to g8 is the smart mate with this, knight to h6 double check, king to h8, and the simple queen to g8, rook to g8, and knight to h6. So Fabiano resigned because he could see that happening. So guys, thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be covering the second game between Fabio and Magnus, where Fabio had the white pieces, and we'll see how it goes. Have a good evening ahead. Take care.